Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Jayme Shiarla on, and I would like to refer to her as the emotional mirror, but something that I have said multiple times over is that I can give you the best training plan. I can go into the utmost detail with your nutrition, make sure that everything is optimized for your best body composition, but none of that matters if there is this huge block that's getting in our way. And what is that block? And you can introduce yourself with that answer to that question as well.
Perfect. Yes. So I've never been called that before, Ruby. So I will gladly wear that title now too. So, yes, guys, I am Coach Jayme, and I'm actually an executive wellness coach and neuro linguistic programming practitioner. So, for me, I just like to say that that's a fancy smancy way of telling you that I rewire your brains and I shift your perspective. So, kind of going to that point is I agree 1,000%. If you are so dedicated to believing something, that in fact is a limiting belief. And until you have something that can debunk it, you're more than likely going to cling to that and not necessarily be willing to hear anything else. That's also known as a cognitive bias. So I know this is a lot of like fancy jargon, but realistically, what it boils down to is that being open to having your perspective challenged and being willing to see it from a different light is something that actually can help you better get the results. Because as Ruby mentioned, like she can drill tactical stuff all day long, but you have to be willing to do the deeper work here in order to really see the results
I
happen.
find that to be such a pivotal aspect that can, I feel like become our own worst enemies the more that we try to rush the process, because this stuff isn't something that you can just come to light about overnight. And it's not even a month. Like, this takes a lot of time of realizing, hey, this isn't serving me, bringing more awareness into it. And this is where awareness is probably one of the greatest progress markers that you can have, because that's when we start to challenge our own thinking. And you did mention cognitive biases there. And I feel like there's so many that come up in this, like catastrophization, like perfectionism. What do you see to be the most common ones, and how do you see that show up in the reasons why someone can't get to where they want to be?
Oh, so that's hard because I work with men and women all around the world. So I see a little bit of everything, but a lot of them have high performance as part of their identity. And a lot of them, more times than not, have more of the negative cognitive bias, meaning that their natural bias is to cling to something that is negative. But I do also have some people who kind of fall into the toxic positivity trap where it's like, I'm fine, everything is good. And they always see the silver lining that yeah, girl, they completely dismiss any potential negativity because they just avoid it completely. But another very common one is, and I kind of like associate it with like the bandwagon approach. Like I'm just going to keep leaning in and follow people that affirm what it is that I already believe, think, and feel. And so it's like you have people that are validating you, so you're still accepting that as this neural pathway of yes, this is the way my brain is telling me is the correct way to go. So it's like no matter what, we all suffer from some form of cognitive bias. It's just the more that you're willing to become aware of it, that's when you can start to shift out of that and be able to. It's kind of like the whole, I'm sure you guys have heard this concept before. It's like growth minded versus fixed minded, right? You want to be able to grow and try to challenge what it is that you have known to believe as true the entire time. And what I always like to tell people is like, one, you're not broken and like I'm not here to fix you, but like none of us have life figured out. And I have a quote for everything. I even wrote a book that's literally full of quotes, but it's in Alice in Wonderland. And it says, there's no sense in going back to yesterday. I was a different person then. So it's like the things that you now know today aren't the same things that you knew then. And you can use that as a tool to get you where you want to go next. However, you also don't have to cling to that past version because that's not who you are anymore. I went on like 6 different tangents, but I see you taking notes. So take with that what you want and let's run with it.
ADHD, I love tangents. I always use them, and I'm going to go through every single one of them. So you mentioned the close and, well, the fixed and growth mindset. Something that I've actually shifted that towards is I feel like it's more so a willingness to learn. And I feel like there are so many people who aren't willing to learn or willing to get uncomfortable with discomfort, with the feelings that of new, because we like the predictability. And one thing that comes to mind there is when there's a new thing and we want the outcome of the new thing, but we don't want the fear of judgment or the fear of failure. And I think that goes into a lot of the cognitive biases that you mentioned there as well. But so many people aren't willing to experience that because of the negative bias that they have. And I wholeheartedly love what you mentioned about the positive one. That's where I was like, yes, this, because it's almost like we try to force our way through it. So we're always skimming over the surface. And because of that, the same issues keep arising and we never actually feel good within our skin. And then we end up quitting programs or blaming a coach or blaming something else because we just act like everything's fine and dandy, but deep down, we're not actually happy with what's going on. I had a conversation with someone about this as well, where they avoided all things like filming their lifts, anything like that, because they didn't want to face what are my strengths. They didn't want to look at the positive aspects that they have. They just wanted to ignore the fact they weren't confident. But trying to just get through life without addressing what's underneath is going to keep you reverting back to, well, I'm never going to be happy with my body no matter what I achieve because I've never actually addressed the reason for that. That addresses that part. And then, yeah, the closed and open-minded, it's also everything is figure outable. But many women, note this one down, this one's huge. Everything is figure outable, but most of you don't have self-trust because somewhere along the line, you kept staying in that same fixed zone, repeating the same things over and over, only getting the same outcomes. Like, it doesn't make sense. You think about it, you want something new, yet you're trying to force a faulty system harder. Faulty systems don't just work. You need to fix the cogs. You need to get some new screws in there. And then something else you said, you can't go back to yesterday. I love that part because something I used to say is bring the best parts from the past and figure out how you can form them into a new future alongside all the lessons learned. Because I've always wanted failure. I've always wanted negative feedback that came from a more productive, critical point versus someone that's just there to shame on you. Because without that critique, you're never going to improve. Without that failure as feedback, you're never going to improve. So what exactly are you doing if you're not willing to go through that aspect? So take with that what you will, because I feel like this feeds into that whole social bias of availability bias, recency, and negativity bias that forms our reality that isn't our reality, just of perspective of it. You never know how good you can feel until you start feeling good. And I find that to be fundamentally true with nearly all of my clients. And I know you do as well. But the thing is, it takes a while to get there it takes even longer to get there for so many women who aren't willing to just trust what happens on the other side. They stay so clung to what they believe fundamentally to be true, which is what we spoke about before I hit record, which I would love you to go on the tangent of. But there is also, the rose tinted glasses. There's also that whole metaphor of things where maybe you need to just figure out what it can look like through other people's lenses. Like, if there was another way to view this, what would that look like? What could be another version of this reality? What could you probably have looked into mental models because that's kind of what you do. But there's like this mental model I love of reverse storytelling. It's like, okay, so what is the thing that you're coming up with? Let's think of all the reasons that could lead to this feeling, to this outcome, to this thing that you want to change. And then start branching off from all of those. What could lead to that? What could lead to that? And you come up with all these different versions of stories. That could be the very reason for your reality being as it is. But until you actually go into these other mental models, you're going to keep repeating the same one that is leaving you feeling like utter shit. So
yeah,
we're
the other side of it. Yeah. So like on the flip side, what happens if you like have a bad stench in your house because you had like old vegetables or like raw meat that was just chilling in your garbage, and you like just are used to staying in your house and you haven't left in a while, and then all of a sudden you walk out of the house and you come back and you're like, what the F is that smell, right? Like, you have to get out of your environment. You have to get out of your head. You have to change something up to really see if it's a good or a bad environment or not, right? Like, that's with anything in life, whether it's something with your fitness and nutrition, whether it's your job, whether it's your relationship, whether it's literally where you live physically, right? Like, it's something that you have to be able to get out of it to learn and know and understand if that is as comfortable as what you think it is or not.
Yeah. And there's actually another because you love quotes, I came up with this quote ages ago when all of a sudden I was listening to actual music on Spotify. Usually I just listen to podcasts, but now podcasts are annoying me the hell out because they always have ads on them. Mine will never have ads because I hate that shit. But all of a sudden I started listening to Spotify music and there were just ads always coming up. And I'm like, you never actually realize how shit it is and how shit it was until you get Spotify Premium. As soon as you're on Spotify Premium and then you move back to the normal one and then there's all these ads, it's like, wow, now I know how bad I had it. And that's the thing. Like, you can't, one of my clients said this and I want to know what you would say to it. She's like, I said to her, you never actually can see the label on the box if you're inside of it. And she goes to me, I didn't even know there was a box to begin with.
Ooh, I like this. Obviously, I feel like there would have to be more context that maybe that would make a difference on how I respond. But my question would be, are you sure? Because again, more from like a fixed mind, you are living in a box. So it's like, okay, like what makes you think that you're not in a box? And then what would maybe consider being, or what would you think being in a box would be like? And how is that any different from what you're experiencing? So I would almost challenge that with a question of like, I didn't even know that I was in a box. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the first thing that comes to my mind on how I would, but I think I would need more context to be able to dive deeper on that.
Yeah, I thought so, because I feel like a lot of us get these cues, but we keep shoving them off from some sort of fear, or because, like you said, we don't like sitting with our emotions. And I think that's something that you speak so wholeheartedly on that I do actually want to go into, because going to let's just go to the stillness part, because many times you've said you need to slow down to speed up. And that's something that I wholeheartedly agree with. But for so many of our clients, rest feels like we need to earn it. We need to earn, if we're not working hard enough or checking off our to-do list, then we don't deserve to rest. The to-do list never actually ends. It's almost like, do you ever not have any clothes to wash? There are always clothes to wash. Like the ones you're wearing right now are going to need a wash. Like it's never going to end. And you're always going to need to put bloody sheets on your bed as well, and you can have a fit with a fitted sheet all you want. But how do you help someone stop associating their worth with how much they do or how much they accomplish, these needing to achieve? Because I find, just to tie it back to what I do so that you can make the connection, I find that wanting to like overwork in that element sometimes takes them away from doing the things they need to do consistently, or feeling like they can actually commit themselves to the right path, the sustainable path, the one that actually they see as this long-term journey, if they feel like they need to put everything on hold to do this perfectly so they can do everything else because life is too busy.
Yes. So I feel like there's multiple ways that I want to respond to this. The one being is, I can't force somebody to want change. Like I can't want the results for you more than what you want them for yourself. And so that is actually one of my pre-qualifiers, and why when I do a session to even onboard somebody as a client, like, yes, I want to make sure you're coachable, but I double check, like, I'm here to be in the trenches with you, but I can't do it for you. And I need to know that you're actually committed to wanting to put the time in, that like you have this intrinsic motivator to want to actually change this. If not, it's a waste of both of our times. And so for me, like, because what's the quote? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. I could give you all of the strategies. I can hype you up and be your number one fan all day long. I can challenge your perspective all I want. If you're not in a position that you're willing to receive it and willing to do something with it, we're not going to get anywhere. And so the other way that I would say that is that I think it depends on the person, because I have a lot of business coaches and then health and wellness coaches that I work pretty closely with, where it's like, if they're not ready for me because they don't want to face their demons and they don't want to do the deep dive of what's truly going on in here, and all they can focus on is like, give me a challenge, give me a to-do, let me check this off, let me achieve these goals, go work with a business coach. Go with a fitness and nutrition coach to hit your gains, to lose your weight, to get your calories in check, whatever. Go do that, because it ain't going to work out with you and I. So I will refer out, but then there's some times where I'll also have these business coaches and these fitness and nutrition coaches that are like, I've reached the capacity on what I can do for you. because I'm trying to help you get the results, but it's deeper than this. And now I think you need to go talk to Jayme. So I think it's very much the person has to be in a position where they're actually willing to put the work into that. Because I even looked through many times of my journey and like where for me, I wouldn't have been in a proper headspace to be able to take on someone who wants me to try to like dive into that. And so I think that it's very situational is my long-winded way of saying that.
A few thoughts came up to that. And usually when we reach out for help, in that context that you were talking about, it would be because they know that there's something missing. There's something that they're craving, that something materialistic or another checkbox isn't going to check. But it's kind of hard to see that when you're so used to staying on the same Ferris wheel. It's like you don't know there's another path. And then you start realizing, no, I know this isn't the way. Like, I know this fundamentally that there's something else, but I just can't get myself unstuck. Like we know that, but it's almost like Velcro. It's like no matter what we try to do, we come off, but then we come back on again. It's like we are able to come out of it to see it. We're not completely stuck. It's just we can't completely detach the thing. It's part and parcel. But there's something else in that I think as well. If I think about clients as examples, we know that we want to change and we want to change. So that's why we're asking for help. But like I mentioned, it's so hard to get out of it because it's giving us this validation, this people pleasing, but I need to prove my worth. I can't see it any other way. I find it so hard to change routine, so hard to change. But then on the other side, it's like we only see things as it's either this way or that way. There's no like in between, or we don't believe in ourselves enough to try a different path. That's probably a third path. There's not just two options. For example, if we're overworking ourselves at work and it's not allowing ourselves to have time for ourselves, then that's when this is probably something that can tie into something more in lines with what I deal with emotional eating, with body image, because that's when those issues start to come up more because we don't feel in control of our inputs. How do you see the two connected, transitioning to what I wanted to talk about? But it's like, I felt like we had to do that.
We had to warm it up first, right? Before we just attack the muscle. But so yes, I mean, I agree 1,000% because that's also, I think in my opinion, that if you are a good coach, that's also where you're going to be able to help navigate that person through that. And I think how that happens is also by really, really trusting the person who's going to battle with you is super, super important because a lot of times the reason why this happens, and this is a tough love moment. A lot of what I also coach on from a high level perspective is boundaries and communication. And people make time for the things they want to make time for. And so you're not too busy with work. Your work is not too demanding. You are choosing to let your job run your life. But it's also because you're doing that because that is one area that you feel safe because it's what you know. It's because I have so many people where it's like, I don't know why I can act this way at my job, but I can't do this with my family or my friends or my significant other. And I'm like, I do, because this is all just business to you. And it's easy to complain, but you also have the motivation that there's a paycheck waiting for you on the other side. Like you have this reward and all these other ways of it's like, because it's going to fund your dream and your financial freedom. It's easy to go for these superficial things, but back to your point with the emotional eating and all of that, what's happening is that's you trying to control a situation in the moment to feel good because something doesn't feel good. And you're needing this relief of pressure and you want to just, and I'm saying this as a blanket statement because I know that this is in all scenarios. Because fun fact, I've been in recovery from binge eating disorder, emotional eating, and disordered eating. And every time to go back to it, it was in a moment that I felt lonely. It was a moment that I felt rejected. And it was something that I needed to do to just feel like I could take the pressure off of life and escape my reality. And I found that through the pleasure of food. It used to be through the pleasure of working out and completely like annihilating in my body because it felt good to push myself to a limit that probably wasn't safe because I was disciplining myself from the food issue that I didn't know about just yet, but I felt like I was being productive. So when I was feeling like a failure elsewhere, at least I could feel good here. But then at one point it was also alcohol. At one point it was also relationships. So no matter what your vice is, it's something you're going to escape your reality because you don't like the one that you're in that moment. So yes, it very much correlates to all of this. And that's where like why so much of my work, that's the only thing that I focus on. I don't care about necessarily getting any clear-cut goals for you of how much money is in your bank account, what the number on the scale says, any of that. I want to get all of this in check for you. So now you have the emotional capacity and energy to go do the other things and do them well. Because now, one other point that I want to mention that I didn't get to touch on, but that you talked about, slowing down to speed up, rest. We don't know how to do it, but that's also partially because the world shows us it's sexy to be in hustle culture and to grind all the time and to be able to wear busy as a badge of honor, which is why you feel you have to work so hard to be able to be rewarded with rest. I actually just did this last night at one of my speaking events that I had yesterday. People so freaking uncomfortable because we don't even know how to sit in silence anymore. Because it's like, wait a minute, did my screen lag? Did she forget what she was going to say? Hey, maybe I can check a text message real quick because she's not talking. Hey, wait, what? No. Oh, what were you saying? Nobody's talking real quick, right? Like, we are thinking of where our head can be anywhere else, but in this moment of silence. To me, that is where productive rest takes place, is when you can, I'll drive this home with a quote again, because that's half of my life is quotes. If you're living in the past, you're depressed. If you're living in the future, you're anxious. And if you're living in the present, you're at peace. And so when you can learn to sit in silence and be comfortable in that, that's where peace can happen. And when you feel peace, that is the end result that every single one of my clients ends up saying that they want. They tell me they want more energy. They tell me they want better relationships. They tell me they want to feel more purpose in their job. But when we keep talking, the very word we get to is peace. And where do we find peace? In rest. And what does rest require? To be able to shut off. And not because you earn it, because you're not a freaking robot. It's literally part of being a human being. You are a human being, not a human doing. So you need to be able to rest and be. Okay, 12 tangents later, back to you, girl.
I love that like these quotes, they are powerful because it kind of just makes the complex into something a lot more simple. But just because something can be said simply doesn't mean that it's easy to start to put into practice, put into life. And many times when we are anxious, it's because we're worried about how things can unravel in the future. But at the same time, we're not slowing down to plan for it because we think that we need the perfect plan. And I don't know what book I read this in, but it changed my perspective on plans. Well, the way that I talk about plans. And that's that when you have a plan, it's not ever meant to get you to where you want to be, ever. It's just meant to get you out the door. Because a plan is just like having a roadmap focused on what you know to focus on. Two different books put together because I freaking love Shane Parrish. But something he said is that when you're trying to draw a map, you're only going to put things on the map or only select things on the map that are of interest to you. So if you're someone that has kids, then you're going to look for schools, you're going to look for things that are really good for them. And so you're going to place those on the map. But if you were to give that to someone who doesn't have kids, who doesn't give a shit about what the youth can do, then that map is entirely useless to them. But also at the same time, you can take the map that's perfectly curated for what you know is there. As soon as you get out into the real world, you didn't know there were traffic lights, roundabouts. You didn't know there was terrain. You didn't know there was a detour that they just started doing roadworks. Like all these things in the unknown, now you're going to have to change things up on that plan. It's just getting you out the door with a clear direction on where you want to go. But if you expect it to be the perfect thing, no wonder you struggle to stay consistent. No wonder you struggle to put plans together, to have goals, because you think that those goals are the be all end all, because you think that plan is the be all end all. I freaking love talking to you. It just sparks everything. But in what you were saying with the rest, I know that you've also mentioned somewhere that your most successful clients end up also feeling the loneliest because that's more of an internal state, because we keep trying to achieve, yet we're never actually doing anything to fulfill ourselves, which is kind of where we go to the coping mechanisms of food. But I know you've also said, which I want you to talk on more because I've already brought up awareness, the coping mechanisms like emotional eating, all this kind of stuff isn't the problem. The lack of awareness is. And it's kind of like The Mountain Is You, the book, The Mountain Is You. It's like, yeah, okay, we can say all these things are coming up. Your body image, how much you hate your legs in your shorts, how much you feel like this, that, and the other, which I hope you know that the way that body image has nothing to do with the body because you don't see yourself as you are. That's something you can bring into this as well. But we need to get to the root cause. And unless you're willing to have that discomfort, because awareness is discomfort, just like silence, how do you help someone to work through that? And what do you have to say about that whole thing?
Yeah, I think, shocker, because I can't ever just give one answer, because this is going to tie into what you said too about like, having this clear cut plan and this destination that you're aiming for. Again, this is the very thing that I focus on people with, and I call it the I'll be happy when syndrome, right? How many times that which I'll share a story here in a moment, but like even you hear like these bodybuilders, right? Like they literally have leaned out so very much, and then all of a sudden it's still not enough, and they're finding another area that isn't perfect, and then now they have to keep working even harder, and it's like they never actually celebrated the success that they had because the high didn't feel as good as what they thought it was going to. And so now they're chasing their next fix. So you're never, until you die, you're never reaching the end of your destination. And so I think that that's what's super important is stop chasing after the when and let yourself experience like the good in the journey as it's happening, right? Like think of when you fly for the first time and you're in awe of like looking down at the earth, like underneath you. But if you've never flown before and you just decide to go on the plane and keep your eyes shut and you just all of a sudden pop up at your destination, you missed out on a really cool experience of just being above the world in that high level way, right? You miss out on so much if all you're doing is chasing the end game. I did a discovery call with a 77-year-old man. This is actually pinned on my Instagram feed. He came to me, super successful, married with kids, like they're all debt free. He owned multiple homes. He had taken top 4% in the company of the auto industry since he was 19, over 600 employees, all this stuff. And I was like, okay, sir. And he'd been retired for like 7 years. I'm like, sir, what are we doing here? Like, why are we on the phone right now? Mike, because you technically are living the dream that this is what everybody's like aiming to get out of life. Yeah. And so he was like, well, my wife thinks I'm a lot. I think I'm a lot. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, and I just don't feel like I have much purpose. And I was like, is this because like the novelty of like retirement wore off? And he's like, the easy answer would be yes. But if I was being super honest with you, no. He's like, I've always felt this way. I just happened to be really good at making money. And it was better than ending up in jail or choosing drugs and alcohol. And so he went his whole life on paper looking like he had it all. And now he's 77 years old. Like, what did I do with my life? He missed all of it. So it's like that's what I do is I come in and I train people to like experience the goodness as it's happening while still wanting to achieve and strive for more. And then so that secondary part in how I make that happen is that's the very thing is that you have to start being able to become aware of your thoughts. So I do that in a very small way, just like you would a runner training to go from a couch to a 5K, right? It's the same thing. You're training a muscle, and I slow people down and I teach them how to bring awareness to their thoughts. Like the book, The Power of Now. I remember the first time it was in like one of the beginning chapters, and he goes, do you control your thoughts or do your thoughts control you? And I'm like, dude, how did you write a whole freaking book? This is lame. Of course my thoughts run me. Like I can't control that. They just come into my brain. This was very early on in my life. And what I quickly realized is like, no, because I can only control what I can control. And that's my thoughts and my reactions to things. And so the more and more that I slowed down and literally was like, what am I thinking right now? If I had to ask myself, like I'll have my clients like set reminders on their phone, like, what do I actually feel right now? What did I literally just do in the last 10 minutes? Because I have clients who will meet with me and a whole week goes by and I was like, all right, how was this last week? They're like, I don't even know what I did last week. I'm like, that's a problem. Like that's 7 whole freaking days, man. What do you mean you don't know what you did? Slow down. Like if that's what it is, like I want you to carry a freaking notebook in your back pocket all day and I want you to document what you're thinking all throughout the day. So now, again, training yourself to actually acknowledge your thoughts. So now once you acknowledge your thoughts, now you can start bringing awareness around your thoughts. And now that you bring awareness around your thoughts, now you can start to shift them and no longer let those thoughts have power over you.
That's why you're an emotional mirror. That's the thought is like the rosebud. It's the seed. And then we let that thought become a rosebud and then it starts to infiltrate different things and we need to become aware of it so that we can actually start weeding out what needs weeding and flowering what needs flowering. But I think that's a huge thing as well, which I will give a question to you soon on it. But we feel like if we address these particular things, that means we're not going to achieve anything anymore. We're not going to be successful. It's like a conflicting idea, which limiting belief, as you said, which I do want to go deeper into the limiting beliefs, because I feel like that's one of the biggest things that holds people back. And I feel like those those beliefs are the very thing that factor into the way that we see our bodies, because that becomes our fundamental truth. And then we try to fix something that isn't going to get fixed by focusing on the problem, because I was one of those people that got so thick skin lean, you couldn't actually do a single skin fold on me. Yet I was still wanting better, wanting more. And that's what we end up chasing. And then that turned into a thing for powerlifting. And I just wanted more and more there, which I do now, but it's from a healthier pursuit. Like, I have a lot more balance within it. But back then it was just that more. No, once I get the junior records, no, now I want a 200 kilo deadlift / 440 pound deadlift, or whatever that ends up to. And because you mentioned this as a disruptor, like the retirement as that man, my disruptor was COVID came in and was like, shit. That's when all of my that's when I became the most like self-reflective, self-aware. That's where so much of my internal growth came, like that COVID period, because all of a sudden I was sat to face myself, to face my and question everything and question why, it changed everything. But I feel like in that one, the disruptor is a huge thing. And that factors into another cognitive bias, the inertia bias, which I want to kind of bring into this as well. The inertia bias, the disruptor, and then that whole still achieve thing. And then you mentioned how long this takes. This is why you need to get rid of the urgency, because this is a process to work through. But you've worked with people who've achieved all of these things. They're like successful in these other areas of their life. A lot of this then turns to fixating on how we look. And we find it hard to separate our appearance and how we feel in our body from our identity. We feel like we're giving up or letting ourselves go. How do you see all of that factor in?
Yeah. One, I think the other thing too is, like, speaking on limiting beliefs with that, is that the fact of the limiting belief is just that it's limited. It doesn't mean that it has to be from some traumatic experience. It's just that you've practiced that belief for so long, or that's the only belief you've ever been exposed to, which why a disruptor comes along. And now you are forced to have that belief challenged. And then that's when you get to overcome it. So there's that part to it that I think, like, it's breaking a habit of your thought patterns, right? An analogy that I always like to give here, that I had from a reference from a pastor who wrote this book called Winning the War Within Your Mind. But he talks about, like, an analogy of like your neural pathway. And when you keep repeating it over and over again, it's like you're like on like snowy land and it's flat. And like you take a snowmobile and you just keep driving. And then that's your path, because that's the path of least resistance. And so you keep driving in that path. Well, now that path keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and the snow is getting piled up higher and higher and higher on the outside. So now the resistance for you to get that snowmobile out of the path is going to be way harder than if initially you would have allowed yourself multiple paths from the beginning. So rewiring your brain is going to take time, because you've embedded this pathway for so long, which from the NLP perspective, many of this came from a very young age. The other thing that I want to point out, and I don't know if this was a thing in Australia, but it was huge in America, with the whole, it was this phrase, it takes 21 days to make a habit. That was a freaking marketing ploy. It is actually false. Studies have shown that it takes, I believe it's like up to 81 days to make a habit. And the reason being is because realistically, these habits, a great book that I recommend to everybody is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. And it talks about how little things don't seem like a big deal until it's compounded down the road 6 months to a year later. And so COVID, for example, right? So many people where it was like, oh, I can't leave the house, so I can't go to work. I'm going to stay up later and I'm just going to drink some wine tonight because today was stressful and the world's a mess. Now I'm going to bed later, but hey, I don't have to get up as early because I don't have to drive to the office. So now I'm going to hit snooze. So now it was like, I only drank one day during the week and then was on the weekends. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, shoot, I have nothing else to do today. I'm just going to drink all day. Or, hey, that glass of wine now turns into a bottle of wine because I don't have to go to work tomorrow. And now somebody is drinking every single day of the week. That didn't happen in 21 days. It happened over a long amount of time because it was this pattern that slowly snuck in. So like you said, this image and this story that you tell yourself when you look in the mirror isn't usually like because there was this one day you told yourself that. It was because multiple times you had heard that, or there was a memory or an experience you had that reminded you of another moment where you believed that statement to be so true from when you were younger or you were a teen or whatever. And now it associated that thought with an emotion. And now there's a fact that you've embedded into your brain to believe as true which it's not. And so a lot of what I like to do is come in and call bullshit on these belief systems. I'm like, we're going to go full blown mythbusters on what this belief system is that you just established, because of the fact, and this, your mindset is going to work the same as literally your body, right? Like if you didn't gain 50 pounds overnight, you can't lose it overnight. If these storylines and these belief systems have been in the back of your mind that you weren't even aware of, good or bad, it's just limited. Remember, if that has been a story that has been playing in the back of your head since you were 9 and you're 45, that's not going to go away in a freaking week. It's something that has to be practiced, right? That snowmobile that has to try to get out of this deeply rooted snow track that it created.
Most of the things that I've thought about and my most sticky quotes and visualizations and metaphors and shit have all come from the running idea during the COVID period. But one that I came up with then, which I love because it's what you said, because our brain sends electrical signals. I used to refer to this as like electrical cables. Your brain has created these huge electrical cables, and that's the path that it's used to. That's what it's been doing your whole life. And however long you've lived, they've become thicker, and you can't get rid of these things. You can try to form new pathways, but it's always going to send down this electrical signal. You're going to have to keep actively directing it. You need to keep the awareness there. It's kind of like when you're trying to learn a squat or a deadlift. It's like you need to put so much focus and intention into bracing, hinging, how to get your hips right, all of these different components. And then soon you just need that setup. And then it just starts like you need to get everything right at the setup, and then everything else locks in, but you still need to focus on that setup. And that's the same with the cables. It's like you need to focus so intently on it, and then you still need to focus on it, but not as much. And you need to keep repeating it. And I feel like if we keep shaming ourselves for it flicking back to the old switch, you're just shooting yourself with the third arrow, the fourth arrow, and so on. And each time you do that, what happens when you shoot yourself? You just become more wounded and you end up feeling more hopeless. Then what's the point? Because you're bleeding from 100 holes all over your body. And then, because you mentioned that book, have you ever read Rewire by Nicole Vignola?
The Cliff Notes, but not, I haven't actually read it.
Optimal. Like, I love that more than Atomic Habits by James Clear. It is so good. Yeah. That part in particular, because that book kind of put a lot of pieces together with how neuroscience actually works, because it takes so long to form these new things, and there's so many different elements that impact us along the way. Like there can be a huge breakup with a boyfriend or whatever else that comes into it that then impacts how we then view ourselves, and it brings a whole, like, we could be well on the way, and then this brings in things that we didn't even think to be issues. And then you mentioned this part, you can't break particular patterns straight away. There's a process to it. And bringing this back to the emotional eating, I feel like there's a lot of denial that comes in among things, and also the body image, the emotional eating, because I still feel like that's the biggest part of all of this, because we find that's the reason we want to change our bodies. And until we can actually start to focus on what actually matters, then we can start to feel more confident within ourselves and get to where we want to be, because it's always going to be the emotional eating. It's always going to be thinking that we need another diet versus spending more time away from the diet so we can actually fix the fundamental things that are holding us back. Because you can't change those things in a period of restriction. When trying to shrink to your smallest self is the only goal, how are we going to fix all these other things? Because they're only going to be more of an issue. That actually gave you great fodder.
This is so good. This is so good. I love this. Yeah, no, I agree. Because even on that note, like, I remember there was a couple of coaches that I'd interviewed back when I was first going into my recovery for like the binge eating and the emotional eating and stuff like that. And they're like, are you willing? They asked me as a pre-qualifier, are you willing to gain weight in this journey of being able to heal emotionally through this? And at the time I was like, absolutely freaking not. I already am disgusted with how I look. There's no freaking way. So again, like, I just wasn't ready at that point. And then I remember I ended up like, because at that point I was still in denial, because I was like, oh, I'm not going to let a label define me and all this type of stuff. I'm fine. Like, I just need to stop giving so much power to food. That was it. And then I remember I ended up like actually like getting assessed with it. And it was all 3 that I was hit with. And there was like this workbook that I had to go through. And the very first chapter was that I wasn't allowed to step on a scale and I wasn't allowed to track my calories. And that was freaking hard because I obsessed so heavily over it. And I was like, I didn't trust myself on what that would look like. And behind the scenes, I was trying not to, but I would still calculate everything down to a T. But then I would end up like shaming myself and then still spiraling out of control. And then I remember like I ended up gaining that year like 20 pounds. And I felt disgusted, but at the same time, that was what set me free from that, because it was like I was able to just genuinely like learn how to trust myself, learn how to be like, okay, hey, we really didn't like how this felt. So why did we let it get that far? Why did we even feel that this was the appropriate strategy to begin with? Like, it allowed me to get to that space. There is a woman, I don't know if you follow her. She went pretty viral for a little bit. I don't know if it was like right after COVID, but Dr. Stephanie Buttermore.
I was going to say, I really want to go down deep this rabbit hole, because anyone listening to this knows my story. I had to like, I found tracking to be I stayed tracking because that was the only way I could have the like, I felt good within that. But I was someone who never thought that I could follow any plan. I was in a place where I needed to, I call it the recalibration phase when I talk to my clients. So I'll just refer to it as that. I had to go through like this recalibration phase where it doesn't matter if I overeat sometimes or whatever else it is. Like, we need to let go of the outcome or the results or the progress. And I have a client example I'll bring up later because I want you to expand on it. But this part is really important. I want you to go back to what you like, go deeper into that, where you got asked the question, are you afraid to gain a little? I want to talk about why this is so important. Because it starts allowing you to ask yourself the right questions to get to the other side. But there's the fear between all that. I want you to go deeper into that before you actually talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, when I really channeled into why, and like, this is so silly. I've actually never talked about this. So thank you for giving me a space to just do this. This is cool. So for me, it was like, okay, why am I so against gaining this weight? And to me, it was because it was this belief system that if I'm fat, nobody would want me. But that was also, this is my phrase I say all the time. I used to double down on shame, that I would be ashamed of myself for being ashamed. And so with that, what it was, because I've never been married, I'm single, don't have any kids. And so there was these moments where like, if I get fat, nobody's going to want me. But then I'm like, but nobody wants me right now. So why not get fat? So it was like a double-edged sword that I would like take myself through. And then it was very much, I had this situation that I had recalled on back from years ago when I had worked with a mindset nutrition coach, and she had me close my eyes and like envision this version of me in this ideal body that I had. And I know what she was doing to like help me be inspired to want to work towards this body of losing weight and everything. But the opposite ended up actually happening, because she's like, what is it that you can do in this body that you can't do now? And I was like, dude, my weight does not change my personality. Like, I am a spitfire of just like sunshine, and I love people. And like, I'm actually the strongest and the most fit I've ever been in my life. So like, I know that I still at least trusted myself enough because of how restricted I was on calories that I would never let myself actually reach the extreme. Like, I went there to the best case, worst case, realistic case scenario that like, I'm not going to end up on my 600-pound life. Like, yes, I may get like fluffier than what I want, but I'm like, I'm definitely never going to let it get there. So it's like, Jayme, chill the F out. Like, it's fine. And then it was actually crazy. I saw pictures after this year had went by, and I had a yellow dress. They were both for Easter pictures, and I had a yellow dress on in both of them. And realistically, I didn't look that different.
Yeah, that part there, but I'm laughing because I wrote this down before you even said it. For me, my thing was, well, I already know that I'm not going to get obese because I already know that I'm someone who can, like, I have this calorie thing under control. I can do that, but deep down we know that that's not the path there. So it's like, we need to ask ourselves better questions, and it always comes back down to that. And I want you to bring that part up there as well as self-trust. This is where self-trust fits into this, because realistically, it's like we can have cognitive biases. We can have all these beliefs that our body is completely different. Oh my God, I'm gaining weight. What if I gain this? What if I gain that? Well, I haven't, because I get my girls off this. It takes a while for some of them to actually throw it away or get someone to hide it. But I don't want my girls on a scale for at least 6 months when they come to me, because that's all they've known their whole life. To me, that means that you're relying on that for validation, and you can't even know what your body feels like because that scale has told you the whole time. Yeah, I will bring up the client later, but I love this. So with self-trust, I mean, because at the same time, it's like you thought that there was some trust there, but it wasn't true self-trust. It was a facade. Tell me more.
Yeah. So one other point I want to pin there too that this mindset nutrition coach had told me. I think I worked with her back in like 2014 or 2015. But she goes, Jayme, why are you so attached to the number on the scale? She goes, because do you realize all that number represents is your gravitational pull on the earth? And I was like, wait, what? But yeah, that just means how much of a pull your body has from gravity on the earth. That's all that number represents. And I was like, wait, what? And so it like the number kind of lost its power there too, that I'm like, realistically, it doesn't mean that much.
Can I just add something onto that number part? For me, I actually still don't know. I keep trying to reflect on it to figure it out, but I can't work it out. For me, I knew that number, because when I started out, what was I? If I think about yours, 80? No, I was less than 80 pounds when I started. I was that bad. But like, I wanted to build muscle. I was fine with the scale until I entered bodybuilding. That's when it all got distorted. But at the same time, I also knew the scale was bullshit, because they don't ask you how much you lift when you're on the stage. They don't ask you how much you weigh. You're judged on body composition. How much you lift and how much you weigh have nothing to do with that. Now, sure, what you do in the gym is going, like the weights that you lift in the gym is going to lead to that bodybuilding physique, whatever, but it's not rep maxing. I always used to ask my clients who try to grow their freaking bicep curls, I'm like, are you doing a powerlifting competition for your 1RM bicep curl? Like, there is an outcome to this. There is a process to the process. So I still haven't figured out why I got so attached to that scale after bodybuilding that I sabotaged so much, because I knew inherently it had nothing to do with anything. So I don't know whether that feeds you anything there as well, because I feel like—
I wonder with that though too, if it was because it determines success. And a lot of times it's like, we want to be successful because we want to be able to prove to everybody else that we're enough. We want to prove to ourselves that we're enough. We want to prove to ourselves that we're capable. And so maybe in that was something that was telling you, right, that because your number wasn't this, it didn't matter how much you lifted. It mattered that like in this arena, this means that you win or you don't. And so more of like from an ego standpoint, but also with the feeling the validation of self-worth, maybe. I don't know. That's what first popped into my mind on that. But yeah, so that was kind of part of it. But I think the other thing, and you very beautifully worded this, I love it, but is that we have a tendency of like getting super fixated on one outcome, that we don't give ourselves an opportunity to see the ladder. And what I mean by that is like, we're so quick to say all these reasons why we don't trust ourselves, why we can't do something, why we shouldn't do something, why it won't work, how we will fail, whatever it may be. But why aren't we ever giving attention, right? This is more of that negative cognitive bias. Why are we never giving ourselves like attention to the things that we can do, the things we do trust ourselves for? Like, flip the script. Like, I remember there was a mentor who the phrase he would always say is trust your track record. Like, look back on the ways that you've overcome really hard things in the past. Like, if I could get through that, I can get through this. Like, remember that one time when I trusted myself on this and it was a positive outcome? Like, we're so quick to go to all of the ways that like it didn't work. But I like to, and again, I have to give credit to one of the pastors at my church who like inspired this, but like it's, I don't know where people stand on their faith, but I'm pretty strong in mine. In the Bible, there's a part that after like God helped Moses split the Red Sea, at the end of it, he's like, before you guys get to go on and experience any of the land, I want you to build memorials right here, because I don't ever want you to forget this moment. And I want you to cling to this in the future for when trials come ahead. So what I always like to say, and what I actually encourage my clients to do, is to build your memorials. When are the times that you have trusted yourself, that you have chosen to love your body in a moment that maybe that you didn't necessarily fully like yourself in that moment? Maybe you did have this moment where eating something made you feel good, or moving your body did feel better than choosing to lean into food or alcohol or sex, drugs, whatever. Like allow yourself to write down the memorials of the moments that you did trust yourself and it was a success. And again, that mental rewiring, if you start training yourself to think of all the times you have trusted yourself, that you did keep your promises to yourself. Aram and I actually talked about this on one of his group calls, to your very point about how irrelevant the number on the scale is. There was and I shared a personal story. There was a day that I woke up, the day before was a phenomenal eating day. I hit my macros. It was all like really yummy food that like wasn't like super processed, whatever. So like gut was feeling good. Everything felt good. Sleep was good. I woke up feeling super confident and I felt leaner. All of a sudden I stepped on that scale and the number wasn't what I was expecting it to be. Later that day, because then I festered on that number not being what I thought it was going to be based on how I felt. And then every time from there, when I looked in the mirror, I saw myself looking fatter than what I did when I woke up that morning, and I felt good. And so what we were talking about with that is that like the times, I think also too, is like when we keep our promises to ourselves, that makes us feel good, that makes us feel confident, that helps us build trust within ourselves. So if we can, again, choose to focus more on those type of things, I think that that's also a great way to help achieve the results that you're looking for.
I'm going in reverse again. And we're going to pin that on the feelings aren't facts. In reverse, but that's really freaking hard to do because
that's why you have a coach, so the coach can help hold you accountable.
Exactly. We give years to problems, to negative things. We like give all of this attention. We complain to our coach about negative things. We go complaining that our plan isn't working, blah, 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 blah. But when things are going well, yay, cool, on to the next thing. We don't give it the attention. So how the freaking hell are you going to remember it if you don't catch these moments? And
I make my clients practice celebrating too, by the way. Celebrating is a big deal.
Yeah, I do that too. And you mentioned that part before, and that was where I was like, oh my God, I do that too. I get my clients to set alarms in their phone to check in with themselves to see what they're feeling and emotional stuff. I'm like, what are you feeling right now? Where have you had, like, what has it been like so far? Have there been emotional highs? If things are going really well, what's going on around you so we can keep capitalizing on that? Because we need to figure out what's triggering this emotional cascade that leads to the emotional eating or whatever it is that their particular vice is. So that was just on that part. And then you mentioned how the scale. I like talking about this. I haven't spoken about it in ages, but I lost 5 kilos overnight. I did water cutting for a powerlifting comp because my body was so stubborn that it would not lose weight, but I needed to weigh a particular number for my powerlifting comp because I was competing internationally and it was a very important comp. I looked extremely lean the next day, as in the day after weigh-ins, not the weigh-in day. The day of weigh-ins, I felt like shit. And therefore, I felt like my body looked like a piece of potato sack bags or a sack of potato bags. So they're backwards. But the next day, what do you do the next day after you weigh in? You've eaten a shit ton of carbs. I was up again by like 6 kilos because of how much I ate the previous day and hydrated. But I looked the best I ever had. I had all my muscles filled out, everything else because I was full. But that's what the scale does. That's like the thing on there. And then something else I get my clients to do, because I love this with what you said, stack the proof. And I call it a confidence resume. Like, where have you been successful in this in the past? What's your confidence resume? You can't build a confidence resume until you start noticing these things that you're doing well, and you'll never do that until you start focusing on the positive, which I want to now tie back over to my side because I want you to make the connection. It becomes a habit, picking on the negative bias, but in terms of always seeing the negatives in our body. And if you're someone who has come to this process with a lot of weight to lose, then you're someone that has focused on needing to lose that fat for most of your life. And if you've lost all of that fat before, there's 3 different ways I want to take this. I want you to explain all 3 avatars. There's a person who's lost a lot, and now they're just like in this place where they know that they're just like skinny fat, or there's a place where they can't push fat loss any harder because they're emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted. As soon as they try to cut calories and binge galore because they've spent most of their life dieting. There's that person who's scared of gaining weight, who's scared of going backwards, scared of losing results, that can't sit in this maintenance without negatively picking on their body, thinking about the next cut, kind of 2 different elements to that person. But then there's a person who's just always picked on the negatives. They could even be a leaner person who just doesn't see themselves as they are, but they've always had this negative self-talk. They're never enough. It's more fat loss that they need, not more muscle that they need. More fat loss that they need, another deficit that they need, not more time away from it. Focus on themselves. Oh, but my life is fine and dandy. Everything in my life is perfect. My body's the actual issue. It's exactly as I say it is. My marriage is fine. My kids are fine. My work is great. It's my body. I know it is. It's fundamentally my body because I feel it I feel my pants tight. I feel my clothes tight. They're tight. That's what they fundamentally believe to be true. There's like those 2, but they're so fundamentally fixated, like this, like I'm not saying this in a way that's shaming for you, you're listening, like I know how, like your feelings, you're feeling them, you're feeling all of these things, the tangible aspect of your clothes, the fact that as soon as you eat more, you feel like you blow up, or that you have no control of your calories, or if you go a little bit over, you're going to get fatter. If you let go of the third one kind of thing, if you let go of the, I need to get leaner, I know I need to diet. If I stop thinking about dieting and let myself go all in, I let myself go, I'll gain fat, I'm going to blow up, what, blah, blah. Take it.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm almost going to look what I've been doing this whole time. I think they all go down the same path. Because my question is then at that point, like, why? Because, well, actually, I would challenge something first. Be like, you say everything else is fine. That doesn't mean it's fine. You may think it is. You may be telling yourself it's fine. But I'm a big believer, how we do one thing is how we do everything. And so you instead are choosing to blame your body as the cause for all of the problems, when realistically that's not the case. Like, I even just had a client recently I was working with, and she came to me because of her eating issues. She was referred to me for that. And in the beginning, we also were kind of talking about stuff with her relationship. And I was like, I want to kind of talk about that. 6 weeks into our sessions together, she's like, Jayme, if you would have told me on day one that we would have talked about my marriage, I would have said F you and I never would have worked with you. But because we did, and she actually was feeling happier in her relationship, the communication was great. She felt connected. She wasn't feeling lonely. The confidence was there because she felt safe and supported. She wasn't fixated and obsessing over food as much because she was feeling joy elsewhere in her life. So I think that in so many ways, it's easy to fixate on like, well, I know, right? I'll be happy when, I'll be able to breathe when, once I have this money in my bank account, then life can finally get good. No more money, more problems, right? Like, there's still going to be problems there just because you make more money. And if anything, they're probably more expensive problems, right? Like, it's easy to tell yourself that if this gets fixed, then everything in life is going to be fixed. And that's not how this would work. And the analogy that I want to give here, I just shared this actually earlier too. Not everything you think is true. You can't always believe what you think. And my proof right here for you guys is this. There was a day like a couple summers ago, and I was getting ready and I had an event to get to, and it was like an hour and a half away from where I would lived. And I wasn't going to be home for like 5 or 6 hours. And I'm like an hour into my drive, and I was like, shit, I forgot to shut my curling iron off. Oh my gosh. And I went into this full-blown panic attack, and I visualized it. I believed it. I remembered the last movement that I did. I didn't shut the light off. I put my shoes on, walked out the door, never turning off my curling iron. And then my brain spiraled. Oh my gosh, I'm going to literally start this entire condominium on fire, and my dogs are going to die. The people in there are going to, do I even have enough insurance for that? But my poor babies, I can't turn around and go back. What do I do? So I called up the property manager, and I was like, hey, you got a spare key? I totally forgot to turn off my curling iron, and I'm not going to be home for like 6 more hours. Can you go into my place and shut it off? 30 minutes go by. All of a sudden I get a text, and it's a picture. And she's like, sweetie, thank you for, like communicating that, because I wouldn't have want the building to burn down either. But she's like, not only was your curling iron not plugged in, it was literally sitting on the opposite side of the sink, not even near the outlet any longer. But I believed it to be absolute truth that I didn't unplug the curling iron and the house is going to burn down. So you can't always believe what you think. So when you're telling yourself everything in my life is fine, but my body, and I know that once I lose this weight, once I gain this weight, people are going to love me. People are going to respect me. I'm going to have this. I'm going to have that. The confidence is going to be through the roof. Now I'm going to start balling out and making money, and I can go do this, and I can be posting on the gram with all these followers and people validating how good I look. No, it's not.
I'm pretty sure those are the fundamental beliefs somewhere in there that you had that stopped you actually hiring the right coaches to get you out of your binge eating disorder, because, or whatever different complex things that you had going on there, because you mentioned there were a few, but that was the exact thing as well, because you believed what was on the other side is everything you ever feared. Do you actually know what that was?
Like what pertaining to that specific situation, or like for me with my issue?
With your particular issue, yeah, because, and then what you see others to be.
Oh, well, mine always very much boiled down to the fear of people not loving me or wanting me. And so it was easy to put this visual is that if I was fat, that was the reason why people wouldn't want me. And if I just had the perfect body, then I would be desirable. But it was because I so desperately was seeking love from people around me. And like, because a little bit about my story, right? So like I run my own coaching business full time all by myself. I've been single my entire life. So I've lived alone. I haven't owned a couch or a TV in over 7 years, just because to me, I don't see the point. I don't want one. I'm staring in front of a screen all day, every day. I don't need that, right? But that got very lonely. And so now when I'm responsible for how my bills are going to be paid, I don't have anybody else to rely on. I have to sell myself and try to be able to have it look like I have it all together all the time to be able to bring in income while still have the passion of wanting to help other people. And then now I don't have anybody to tell my problems to unless I'm paying them, because everybody else has their people that kind of come first. And so this was a trap that I put myself into. See, nobody wants you. That's just your job here on this earth, is to make everybody else happy, but you don't get to be happy, Jayme. And I lived in this victim mentality, and I kept solidifying that I was never going to be enough. But if I worked enough, if I made enough money, if I had the perfect body, then I would be loved, then I would be respected, and then I would be successful. And when I quickly realized that none of that was true, that's when the game changed.
Okay, so this fed a lot of thoughts because this is powerful. What do you say to the woman who's afraid of setting boundaries, that their belief is that they'll stop being needed, or that people will stop wanting her and loving her, or that if it's a job thing, they'll stop seeing her as capable of someone who can do their job properly because they say yes all the time. They find it hard to say no because they don't want to let go of control. They think that that leads to utter chaos, and that they don't see freedom on the other side. It just feels chaotic. And with that, a lot of women also confuse being liked with being worthy, with being successful, with being the utmost, most important thing ever, without realizing that it's actually taking them away. Where do values fit into this would be a question with this, because I can think of a client in particular who has her values of peace, of all of these things that you can see that she wants so inherently to be true because it's everything that she does. Like our values that we want most, that we feel most disconnected from as well, are the things in our life that we are craving, we aren't getting. We are chasing other things. So until we make that connection, it is very hard for us to feel good. So we keep chasing these other things, hoping that it'll get us to our values. What exactly do you say to someone who's built their whole identity around this? Because it's become a habit, a pattern.
Yeah. So there's a tactical way, and then there's I'm going to go for your heartstrings way. I'm going to start with the tactical way, because you did mention boundaries in general. Like I actually have an entire course on this. I could talk boundaries all day long. We're already pretty thick into this, so today will not be that day. But when you're setting a boundary, first of all, so many people don't actually know what boundaries are. And that's part one of the issue, is that you say you want to set a boundary, but then you just keep letting people disrespect it. So that's not really a boundary. That's just a wish or an idea of what you want to consider people not doing to you. Story for another day. But I think it's important of like, when you set a boundary, it's a matter of if it's something that's true to you and if it keeps you safe, right? That's the main part for, like, think about it. A boundary is literally like, if you have a castle, the security fence around a castle is the boundary, where the territory of the castle starts and ends. And the security fence, right, around it, the gates are to protect outside things from getting into the castle that shouldn't be there. When they want to open up the gate to let what should and can be in there, they do. So I think that from a level of that, it's like you have to really assess with why that boundary is in place, why it's important to you, and why it's keeping you safe. And if it's something that literally is keeping you safe, then that's something that should help motivate you to not want to let that happen. So the secondary part that I would say, and this is kind of more the ooey gooey one, is, because you mentioned, and it's so valid. And I even remind myself as I'm saying this to you guys, you're worth so much more than what you do for people. And how I want to frame this for you is, I want you to think some of the things or the people that you love most in your life. Would you still love them if they weren't always available? Or do you still love them if they're not always available to do everything that you need from them? And I would guarantee that the answer is yes. So why are you putting this pressure on yourself that you need to do these things? You need to be needed for someone to love you, right? Like quite literally, if you have a pet, your pet doesn't do anything for you. And if it poops on the floor and it costs you a whole bunch of money because it needs to go to the vet, like you're still going to love it anyways, but it's not able to help you pay your bills. It's not going to tell you you're pretty. And you still love your dog or your cat or your parrot, birds, but People can love those too. But either way, like I want to like soften that to have you really consider that like that's the bonus is that like people get to love what you can do for them, but that's not love. Love doesn't come from what you can do from somebody. That's conditional. That's a conditional form of love. That's transactional, and I would very much challenge to say that that's not love.
It's you being you, but you lose your you in the process of ignoring all of this stuff because you've been so busy chasing. One of the things that I said way back like 3 years ago, because I just reposted the podcast, but in my pursuit of always chasing competitions, because I think that for me, I had a fear around, because I always got told I was not diagnosed with my ADHD until recently, but I always was stopped from doing things I truly wanted to try and do because it wasn't worth the money. It wasn't worth the botherance of it because I always quit what I start. So my identity was I always quit. I always fall off. I'm going to get it back. What if I become lazy? Because that's what I always got told. So I always had to put myself into competitions and hold myself accountable to social media. And the fact that there's this date, there's no way I'm letting go of a date because I also have a stubborn personality, to be able to keep my body, keep pursuing, keep myself in the fitness game so I don't lose it. So I referred to it as I became an empty shell of just chasing things. And it wasn't until literally lockdowns that all of this that I've now developed with my introspection, with my ability to talk the way that I did, with all the processes that I did in that process, that have allowed me to feel kind of at peace with the most imperfect way of things being the way they are when there's other things going chaotic. It's like I'm okay with my body at the moment, even though I'm not going all into my training and all into my nutrition being perfect, quote unquote, the way that it usually is, because it's not there at the moment. And I'm okay with that. Like, I acknowledge it. I want it to be better, yes, but I also know that right now there's these other things that I'm navigating, and then I can go back to navigating things the way they usually do, and that's okay. And then you mentioned this ties into it, and then you mentioned conditional, and I feel like a lot of that's with our body as well. It's like, unless it looks a certain way, unless it fits this perfect criterion, then we can't be okay with it. But then as soon as we like lean ourselves down into like this perfect little image, now we're okay with our bodies. But our bodies change over time, and as soon as it strays from that, are you just okay because you're dieting and dieting feels familiar and it's comfortable and you feel like you're quote unquote making progress because you're so intently focused on low calories, et cetera, et cetera. But as soon as we try to pull you away from that, now, how do you feel about your body? It's a completely different story.
And I think it's even a matter of like checking the facts, right? Like, yes, you get to see the highlight reels on a regular basis of these people who look like they're thriving and they're so happy, but you yourself even said it, that you felt so off in your body because you were so fatigued and you were just you had nothing in you, right? Like so many of these people, like they say that they're like, I mean, like some people are like, yeah, I'm really glad that I pushed myself to that limit. But there's a majority of people that I've talked to, specifically in the bodybuilding world, that's what they say. They're like, I was freaking miserable the whole time. The whole time. I didn't enjoy life. I wasn't present because I was literally so fixated on counting my calories that I missed out on the conversations that were happening in front of me. Like, so again, like I would challenge to say, like these people who are saying that the only issue in their life is their body, bullshit. If all you're thinking about all day, every day is food, how you look, and everything is me, you think the people around you aren't able to tell that you're disconnected and you're not fully even embracing the moments and the memories as they're happening because you're elsewhere. So like tough love moment, but I'm doing it because I care and I love you, even if I don't know you personally. You deserve more than that. You're missing out on what the real like benefit to life is, and it's doing it with people and loving and experiencing in peace and joy. And you get that from those things. And if all of your day is just spent on focusing on food, you're not focusing on what's getting to happen right in front of you. You're missing out on life thinking that this accolade of achieving this body is going to be the thing that does it.
After we look back on those things, we might actually think, oh, I was actually happy. Because if I look back at it, I'm like, no, I was. Like, I don't remember struggling all that much. There are some moments I remember it. But then when I look back at later on, when I was in a better place before I ended up in a worse place again, because kept chasing leaner and leaner, it's like, actually, had the best body composition there. But somehow chasing leaner and leaner just made everything worse. And I look like I just lost muscle because I never spent time away from dieting and training my ass off in the most unproductive way because it was just junk volume, not what actually builds muscle. Yeah, memories aren't real. Bring that kind of into it to tie it to a bow. And I do have one last question to ask that summarizes it, but I'll leave it with that.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is good. And I love that we're able to say the same thing, but from different perspectives. This has been so cool. Thank you for letting me have your time. I feel like we got to like all of the really good stuff too right at the end. So like this could be like the cliffhanger of why people have to hang around with us this long.
Honestly, that's exactly why I'm leaving this last question right now, because we know memories aren't real. How can someone start rebuilding trust with their body when they've used food for control, reward, punishment, or all three, or whatever else they use, whatever vices it is? It could be just the way that you try to fix negative body image with more and more stuff. And with that, bringing in your own experience, what's one belief that you had to unlearn in your own journey that helped you finally let go of all of this shit?
So I want to start by kind of slightly challenging that, because I see and understand what you're saying about memories not being real, but to an extent, I do think that they're still real in the fact that it's something that we have the capability of formulating in our head of what that memory looked like. And so my what was that?
The feelings experienced there that we reflect on how we felt. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so I think that in general, it's like, I think it's worth, I don't know if you ever played it, but I was big on playing Sonic the Hedgehog growing up, the video game. My sister and I would play, and I never got to be Sonic. She always was. She was older than me. So she would always make me be Tails. And she just wanted to go through all the levels super, super fast. But I was like, and plus she didn't trust me to like do anything anyway. So I just had to always tag along. But I always wanted to try to catch all of the rings, because every time you got 100 rings, you would always get another life. And so I always wanted to go back to the past. This is where I'm going with this, to go get more rings because of what that was going to do to benefit us in the long run when we had to catch up with the guy we had to beat at the end of the level, right? And so for me, I think there's power in going back into your memories. It's just what you choose to do with those memories. And so it's like, what I would challenge you is to go back to some of those memories that maybe you thought were super, super good as like the good old days, and ask yourself, but was it really as good as what I'm making it out to be? And then, yes. And then the flip side is, okay, if I'm like really, really like bashing this moment as this horrific experience, was it really as bad as what I thought it was? Because what did it teach me? I say this all the time. I don't have regrets in my life, because it made me who I am today. It's why I am able to show up the way that I do. And the two biggest people I'm most grateful for in my life are my father and my abusive ex. And the reason being is because although it's a situation I don't ever want to go back and relive, don't get it twisted, but I am so grateful to know what a relationship isn't, how not to be loved by somebody, that I am strong enough to not ever let myself get into a situation like that again, because now I know better because I experienced that. So I would encourage you to, when you look back at those memories, is like, okay, this may have been true, but what else was true in this moment? What else can I take from this moment? How can I use that now in this moment? That would be that part. And and your second question was about, what was it? The limiting belief that I had to overcome?
Yeah, that allowed you to finally let go of all of this shit.
There's been tons, because we're always evolving. Oh, there's like 3 that are coming to mind. Which one do I want to go with?
Top 2. That leaves a third.
I am going to narrow it to one. We're gonna build it home. One final one.
I'm going to reiterate the asking better questions part while you think, because the asking better questions, until you get better at asking better questions, you're going to keep trying to solve for the wrong solution. Bringing all of these solutions.
The solution to that is to practice asking questions. So don't just be like, well, because I had somebody ask me that at a conference once. They're like, well, how do I get good at asking those kind of questions? You practice. Just be curious and ask yourself questions. Even if it was a dumb one, nobody knows, because it's all in your own head anyway. Just keep practicing asking questions.
Yeah, that's where I was going to say the positive. You just gave me one more thing while you're thinking. This is where the toxic positivity really lets you down, because it stops you actually being okay with how you're feeling. But when you actually acknowledge that you're human, not a freaking dog or a robot, you're allowed to experience these things. You can start to get curious about why you're reacting in certain ways. But yeah, beliefs.
Yeah. Okay. This one is actually one that I'm continuing to work on, and it is a night and day difference from where it used to be. But it very much still, I think all of our core belief systems always still end up going back down to that, like, of either like fear of failure or like not being good enough. I think that that's in every scenario. It always ends up in some way looking like that. And mine has very much always been more of that conditional form of love, that if I do this, then somebody will do this for me. And so I even used to be really bad at asking for help or receiving things from people because I felt like I didn't deserve it because I didn't earn it, right? Even going maybe back to like that rest thing for people. And my friend had told me a quote one time from a book she read that said, we're only capable of receiving the love we think we deserve. And so my belief system was that I haven't done enough to be loved in the way that I desire. But really, it was that it was there. I just was blocking it and I wasn't willing to accept it. And so when I started to open my hands and be willing to receive, even if I wanted to say no to somebody offering help, if I wanted to say no to letting somebody like love me, I said yes. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, if that's how this really feels. This feels so good right now. So I think that that was probably one of the most prominent limiting beliefs to overcome, was that I believed I had to do a certain amount in order to receive this love that I so desperately craved. And that just wasn't true.
Can I ask a question to that one then? Do you think is part of that high functioning? I think that's highly like a high functioning belief because you're still highly functional. But a lot of it comes down to, well, if I don't do this, then I'm going to be lonely. And then mentioning that you're the solopreneur, it's like there's so much loneliness already. I have to keep this up because what's the alternative? Well, I'm going to be lonely. I already have proof that I'm lonely.
Yeah. So what's the question?
That I wanted to know whether that's what it comes down to. Like, if you don't uphold this belief, then the alternative is being lonely, and that comes with a lot more.
Yeah, shaming myself, saying that what does it really matter and nobody cares. It, like all of that. I think that that's typically the spiral that I could easily go to. But I think that the when I fact check that on if that statement or if that way of living is true, the answer is no. And that's because none of us are meant to do life alone. And we're actually not alone. Like sometimes like we're going to have to do things alone and we're going to feel lonely, but like we're not meant to do life alone. And you're not a failure for asking for help. And more times than not, you denying the opportunity of asking for help, like you're blocking somebody else's blessings. Like you want to wear this pride, like in this ego to you that you're the one that needs to be able to do all of this for everybody else. If you don't do it, it's not going to get done. People need you, but realistically, you're blocking out the opportunity for people to bless you and to love you because you're carrying around that badge of honor that people need you. So you're hurting yourself and you're hurting others. Again, if you truly fact check this. I
love all of this. I love this. Guys, seriously, take this with you. The end of this conversation, you heard Jayme herself asking herself questions. The power of questions is everything. There are so many books that can make you better question askers as well. But if there's any book that you want to look into to start thinking differently, pick up Shane Parrish's books, The Mental Models. Start thinking differently about your own thinking. Metacognition is huge. And also, if you're scared to ask for help, if you're scared to get a coach, if you're scared to have someone on your side, you're not meant to figure out every single freaking thing on your own. Like that is fucking impossible. But also think of the last time someone asked you for help in something that you're passionate about, something that you're really good at. That probably made you feel really good. So the other person, if you're asking in a way where you're actually open to learn, where you're actually willing to do the work and to absorb it like a sponge and to be grateful for their support and their help, they will be over the moon to ramble on about what they're most passionate about. That's the reason these podcasts are made without ads. Like we're passionate about doing this shit. We do it to help you guys. And that's the exact same thing. So take that with you. Reach out to Jayme. I'm going to have her podcasts below as well. And I highly recommend, I went for a little scroll. I highly recommend you like binge listening to some of hers as well, just to get some of her into your ears. And do yourself a favor. Something I find I tell my clients a lot, and I want to know whether you agree with this. Instead of trying to read books or gather information on what you think you need to gather information on, which I recently told a client to, start actually looking for books, looking for more information on ways to challenge how you think about those things, because you'll find that maybe the box that you're trying to solve problems inside of is completely missing what actually needs looking at, which means you need to get yourself out of the box first. And you could look up more nutrition books, more training books, more all of these kind of podcasts to learn how to optimize those things. But what if that's not even the issue to start with? Because if it was, you would have all your shit sorted by now.
I would slightly disagree with this.
Okay, bring your perspective. I like it.
I would still say yes, in the fact that like there's so much power in learning. So I'm not saying don't do that. I just also would say that because I believe we live in a world where we don't have an information problem, we have an implementation problem. You can learn everything that it is you need to learn, but sometimes that can also become your coping mechanism from you actually getting a chance to heal, because you're just throwing yourself into, I need to learn this before I can fix this problem. I need this to fix this problem, when really all of the answers you have are already right in here. That's why I have my podcast, Make Time for Your Mind, is that I want to challenge your perspective, and I leave every episode with a call to action, and I challenge you to get away from the freaking world and just think about it for yourself, by yourself, no other outside influence. The book that I just recently wrote is called Beyond the Words, 123 Quotes to Inspire Action and Growth. So what I do is I give you a quote, but on the next page of every single quote is I share my perspective on the quote, and I challenge you to go do something with it while it's fresh in mind and you're feeling inspired by it. So rather than just learning more information, it's do something with the information.
Okay, got that link now. That'll be in the show notes. I don't know whether you actually sent that to me. I just copy pasted it all, but that'll be down in the show notes, because this is the rosebud analogy. Because every single thought, every single piece of information you get are seeds. They are just going to remain dormant seeds that don't grow unless you start feeding them more, trying to grow them more. But also that isn't going to do anything until you start applying them to different aspects of your life, how they show up, asking better questions and becoming aware. So with that, go and check the podcast description below, reach out to Jayme, read her book, go binge listen to her podcast and start questioning your thinking. What is the perspective shift that you want to leave my audience with? I'll let you do the outro with that, because I quite liked that.
Yes. Perspective shift that I would want to leave you with. Ooh, I've never closed out a podcast, because I always love that when I'm asked to ask or to finish with this, and I always just feel it out in the moment. Naturally, I'm going to end it with a quote. You guys are freaking set on on quotes for like the next year. I used to do hair for a living, and on every Friday, I would always have my weekly regular old ladies where I would do their hair. And I was going through I was reeking of alcohol. It was in my toxic abusive relationship. We went through one of our many breakups, and I was a mess, and I felt like my world was over. And this sweet lady who I did her hair every single Friday, she's like, I want to tell you a piece of advice that was given to me, and this has always stuck with me. And I think since we have been unpacking such a heavy topic, I want to bring us out with something a little bit lighter. And she said, honey, stop taking life so seriously. None of us make it out alive anyway. So I want to encourage you, like, whether you're working to overcome this problem, like, you get to have joy while you're healing. Like, you don't have to wait to experience joy until you finish healing. We're always going to be doing that. Life is always going to have its storms, but like, there's still so much goodness to enjoy in this life. Like, don't miss it because you're taking it too seriously. Think you have to like plan. None of us survive it anyway. So enjoy the ride.
Exactly. And your plan isn't meant to take you to the end anyway, because as soon as you the world is going to dictate it for you. Love you all. Please get me up to 105 stars. I beg you. No, honestly, please. It will mean the world to me. I told you, I don't do ads. I bring you amazing guests and flood you in their world. So go get flooded, and you will hear me on the next episode. Thank you for listening.